The sinking of HMS Glorious. This is one of the most scandalous and disgraceful events in British history. So, HMS Glorious was built as a battlecruiser in World War One, commissioned in 1916. After the War of the Washington Treaty and stuff, it was converted into an aircraft carrier. So it's an early aircraft carrier, not particularly a good one, but it was an aircraft carrier. And it did a sterling job. So in 1940, it was there. It was going to and fro across the North Sea. It was ferrying aircraft, flying off hurricanes into Norway. And actually, the sea battle went very well in Norway. We sent 2 Tribal-class destroyers down into Narvik, Third Battle of Narvik, and sunk anything German that moved. And, it went very, very well. But sadly, the land campaign didn't. Now, historically, that was a missed opportunity. Norway was very savable. And, had we done things a little more correctly, I believe things could have been very, very different in history. But that's not the point in the video. So, the HMS Glorious, anyway, is off the coast. And it's ferrying aircraft in and out. And it comes to the point that, despite shooting up everything German that moves, they have to evacuate because they're getting overrun on the ground. And a whole squadron of Hurricanes is the first time in history that a fixed-wing, fast, land-based aircraft is landed on an aircraft carrier. A whole squadron of Hurricanes was landed. And the squadron leader, it may have been Ginger O'Neill, I'm not certain on that one. I listened to the veteran, but can't remember now, a little while ago. Anyway, landed the whole squadron of Hurricanes, first time in history on the aircraft carrier Glorious. He goes up to the bridge, and he goes up to the captain, whose name is Guy Doyley Hughes, hyphenated surname, posh guy, obviously. And he says, landed the Hurricanes, all present and correct, only tiny bit of damage. One of them suffered a tiny bit of damage, but basically he's landed the whole squadron, first time in history. Doyley Hughes looks at him and goes, fair enough. And, O'Neill can't believe it that this guy is just such a git and so rude. He's expecting praise because he's just, done something incredible, him and his squadron, and Doyley Hughes don't give a damn. But then, even more amazingly, he looks over at O'Neill and he says, well, good job you're here, he says. You'll be more used to me than him. And he points over his flight commander, the person that's in charge of his Swordfish and Fulmar aircraft, his combat air patrol, his attack aircraft, his flight commander, the person that handles all of that stuff, the safety of the aircraft and all that. He just blatantly disrespects him. O'Neill thinks it must be a joke. But then he notices that the flight commander ain't laughing. It's not a joke at all. Doyley Hughes is just a git. And if we go back to his history, when he took charge of Glorious, they were based in the Mediterranean. And he was a show-off. He would do stuff like he would jump off the tip of Glorious, swim round, then go back up the ladder and do it again. He used to literally dive into the Grand Harbour of Valletta from the tip of his aircraft carrier. And apparently he used to dress up in his suit and tie and all the rest of it. And he'd go to parties in Valletta, the capital of Malta. He'd water ski from Glorious. He'd literally get, one of the boats, one of the motor launchers. He would literally water ski into parties from his aircraft carrier. He's a show-off and he's a git. And I don't want to insult him too much because he died in this engagement. But, dearie me, it's just tragic that this person was responsible for taking well over 1,300 British lives. We come to the 8th of June, I think it is. Yes, the 8th of June. And now he's come to the point where he has decided to court-martial his flight commander. Not for any good reason. I've listened to the veterans in the Imperial War Museum Royal Archive, and they were absolutely correct. He had 2 flight commanders, obviously one more senior than the other, but both of them said to the captain, no, we're not going to do what you asked. Because what he asked was a completely ridiculous thing. He said we should send in our planes, our swordfish and our foamers, to a Norwegian airport to fight the Germans. And they said, no, these planes are for defending the aircraft carrier, defending the fleet. They're maritime aircraft. They are not for land combat, and they refused to send them in. For that, he sent his flight commander back to Scapa Flow, and he intended to court-martial him. Now, and quite correct. I mean, look, a 109 against a swordfish. I wouldn't want to be flying the swordfish. A 109 versus the Fulmer. Wouldn't want to be flying the Fulmer. It was absolutely preposterous. The guy had no idea. But anyway, so on 8th of June, the main convoy in Norway is going to go back to Scapa Flow, back to Britain. They're evacuating the army fairly successfully. They're going to depart the next day. Doyle Hughes, the captain of Glorious, says, no, I need to go and court-martial my flight commander. And he gets special permission, ridiculously, to travel back alone. Now, the official history, if you listen to the official historian, is that Glorious was low on fuel. That's why it had to leave early. Now, if you know anything about ships, okay, they burn a ton of fuel if they're travelling quickly. If they're travelling slowly in convoy at, 10, 14, 15 knots, whatever, they burn next to nothing. You obviously burn a little bit of fuel, just, keeping the thing running for, when it's important that. There was absolutely no reason. It was funny. I watched an interview with the official naval historian, and he's ducking and diving and bobbing and weaving. He's like Mike Tyson. It absolutely ridiculous because he can't answer it. And the archives are locked up for 100 years. So we're going to have to wait, 20 years, whatever, to get the official history. If it indeed comes out, it may well have been lost in the floods, as the Yes Minister joke goes. But whatever. He is going back early to prosecute this court-martial. He wants to be the leader of the prosecution. And so he sets back alone, not with the convoy, on, as I said, the 8th of June. Unfortunately, they get bounced by the Scharnhorst. The Scharnhorst opens fire. Scharnhorst is a German pocket battleship, 11-inch guns, roughly. It's metric because it's German, but it's roughly 11-inch guns. Ironically, if Glorious had still been the battle cruiser of old, it would have had 15-inch guns and it would have sunk the Scharnhorst rather easily. But it didn't. It was now an aircraft carrier. Middle of the North Sea, get bounced. The Glorious is alone. It has 2 destroyers with it escorting, that is all, Ardent and Acasta. Ardent and Acasta put up the most valiant fight. They make a smokescreen initially. Ardent is hit by the secondary armour of Scharnhorst, but it does get off a torpedo, and it does manage to hit the Scharnhorst, and it does some damage. They make a smokescreen, they try and protect Glorious. Glorious only has 4.7-inch guns, so it's no match for a German pocket battleship. Ardent and Acasta, being Royal Navy, obviously they don't just run away, because you don't do that in the Royal Navy. They make a smokescreen, try and hide the Glorious, then they break through their own smoke, and they make torpedo runs on the Scharnhorst, the Gneisenau, and unfortunately they came off the worst of it. They both get sunk. And the Glorious is just battered. All of them get sunk. The only good thing was that there were troop ships still going to and fro around this area. And because I believe it was Acasta, may have been Ardent, but I think it was Acasta, because it got a good hit in on the Scharnhorst, she had to return to base. And it meant she couldn't, decimate any of the troop convoys. But that was no help to the men. I've listened to the veterans, and, Glorious sank very quickly after. She was just absolutely pulverised by the Scharnhorst. and she sunk very fast. This is about tea time, or on the 8th of June, 6:30 roughly. The engagement lasted 20 minutes maybe, and it was just a massacre, absolute massacre, and totally unnecessary. And here was the tragedy, right? So we've got over 1,300 people on the Glorious, and most of them managed to get out into lifeboats. They're there in the sea. They're expecting to be picked up, actually, by... they see the Scharnhorst sailing near. They think the Scharnhorst will stop and pick them up. She doesn't. They're there. They think Ardent and Castor, one of them will pick them up. But no, they just break through the smoke and they attack and get sunk. And so we have all these men in the sea. They're floating around for like 3 days. Most of them die of hypothermia, as you'd imagine. Eventually, there is a Norwegian ship that is travelling to the Faroe Islands that happens to come across them. And I believe 37 survivors were picked up after out of well over 1,300. And if you listen to the survivors, as I have done on the Imperial War Museum Archive, they're extremely bitter. And who can blame them? They expected to be picked up by either the Germans or by the British or by somebody. And they end up, no one picked them up. And the worst thing was that we had a heavy cruiser going by at a high rate of knots, carrying out the Norwegian government, the Norwegian monarchy, the Norwegian dignitaries, and it sailed right by, HMS Devonshire. It was under instructions not to stop under any circumstances because its cargo was too precious. However, and this is again a bit of a cover-up, because if you look in the archives, it would appear that they claim they didn't receive a message from the Glorious. They say it's a bit garbled, the position of the sinking was unclear, all this stuff. It may or may not have been. Either way, it would appear they were under instructions just not to stop. So they let all those people drown and die of hypothermia. But the purpose of this video is to highlight the fact that one man, Guy Doyley Hughes, was responsible for killing nearly 1,500 people in the most terrible way. Could you imagine being at sea? You jump in the sea, off Weston-super-Mare, not far from where I am. It's flipping cold. Can you imagine getting sunk and just, floating around for days, just, waiting to be saved or when to die? And, maybe one of its relatives will listen to this video, and I get that sometimes with these history videos. Please tell me, why on earth did he behave that way? There should have been a combat air patrol. They should have been looking around. There was intelligence. We knew the Scharnhorst and the guys they were out. We knew it. So why did you sail back unaccompanied when you have, the whole flipping British fleet with all these, George V class battleships to protect you? Why'd you sail back alone? Just because you want to prosecute your flight commander because he knows more about naval aviation than you do, and he doesn't agree with you, quite correctly. Yeah, it's one of these ones that in the archives, hopefully they will be opened up and we'll get to the bottom of this. But personally, I believe that this was probably the most disgraceful and the most, just the worst, the most egregious example of someone in power, in control, that had no idea what he was doing and was just an arrogant git. Debate me. I stand to be corrected if I'm wrong, but this is how I see it. Thanks.